So welcome to the first of the Poems on series. Today, the theme is music, poems on music. I'm Al Basile. My guests today are Rhina Espaillat and Alfred Nicol. And I'm really looking forward to hear their poems. I hope you enjoy mine as well. So Rhina, please start us off.
Sure. This first poem is called Prosody, and it's a word that comes from the language of poetry, but I'm using it in this poem, which is about music, because after all, poetry and music are twins. They really were sort of born together, and they always manage to get together if the work works. So prosody. The words are what I know, but they are no comfort. The comfort is in the music that says what I cannot know. The words are what I use to make a map of the one place there is, but it's the music takes me where I want to go. The words are addresses, but the things that live in them have always just moved and can be reached, if at all, through the music. The words are a name for the shadow I dress in. The radiance that wears me answers only to the music.
Oh, yes.
That is such the perfect poem to start with, Rhina.
Oh, I love the metaphor there. Oh, that's terrific.
Thank you.
I knew this would be good.
Now, you know that poem, The Radiance I Dress In, when that line, that we used that as the title of our first CD, a Melopea.
Really?
Yeah. That was perfect. All right, well, I'm going to start. I'm going to read my first poem from a book that Rhina and I published not long ago, Brief Accident of Light. And like Rhina, you know, because Al asked us to read poems on music, so I'm going to push the parameters on music. So this poem does make a statement about music, and it's called Wandering City Hall. You see, in this project, Rhina and I were tasked with going around Newburyport to assigned places, walking and then just sitting there and trying to soak in the atmosphere and make a poem. And so here we are at City Hall, and there are all of these portraits of people who've served in the various wars, looking down at us from the walls. Wandering City Hall. More serious than I am, to be sure, the servicemen portrayed here, commandants, the naval officer who died in France of some disease for which we've found the cure, the great war vets, all find me immature. They sum me up with just a passing glance and envy me, my easy circumstance. I've only their approval to endure. I duck and hurry past them up the stairs. An empty concert hall with chandeliers. There in the balcony, the paint is peeling. Reflections move across the stuccoed ceiling. I'll sit a while. There's nothing more to do. These silences should count as music too.
Wow. That qualifies. You haven't stretched the parameter. Silence is also music, as John Cage reminded us. That's
especially
great.
when you're in a concert hall.
Yes, yes. And there's something sad about an unused concert hall. I mean, a disused for years. Okay, well, I'm stretching the parameters just slightly because this really is about musicians rather than music, but there's music in there somewhere. This is a true story. It's called Waiting for Ellington. Excuse me. And this took place at the grist mill in Seekonk, Massachusetts in 1972. Between the band bus and the club's back door, we waited in a line. We'd read he always traveled by car, with Harry Carney driving. They'd have to walk right by us, young musicians, throwback swingers, each in awe of Duke, thinking the same thing. Our drummer John was saying it out loud. What does a guy like me have to say to Ellington? What's he got to hear from me? We stood our ground, affecting nonchalance we thought the Duke might value, shifting weight from one foot to the other. Then the car pulled up and Harry Carney got out. Finally, Duke himself emerged and swept our way, his no loose buttons, not brown overcoat as dap as next year's fashion. What we hoped would be at ease was full attention as he drew up to us, showing no expression. We stood, stock still, forgot to take a breath. When he got face to face with John, he paused. Say, he grinned, don't I know you from someplace? We were completely flummoxed.
That's a great story.
I don't, he must have done that to people all the time, but we were just taken way, way aback by that. He really knew how to
When you in.
Yeah, dominate a moment and reel you in. It was so gracious because, you know, I'm sure he went by tons of people that wanted to say something and didn't know what. So, wow.
Wonderful. That was a wonderful poem.
Thank you. True
That was
story.
so conversational. I like the storytelling style. We just, this happened and that happened.
Well, you know, I mean, a couple of the ones I'm going to read today are really stories. So I thought I'd start off with narrative because that's something I love to do. So, okay, Rhina, you are up next.
Well, we've heard from the musician, we've heard from the poet. Now we're going to hear from the listener.
Oh, good.
One of the listeners, anyway. This is called, and this is a true story too, a concert that took place at Queens College. Thinking of the deaf after a performance of Handel's Messiah. Vibrations rising mute from underground into one's bones. A purring in the wood of theater seats is what they know of sound. I've seen them in the street, sharing their good news with friends, their swallow fingers flying brief, busy routes. I turn aside to give them room for asking and replying. I'll try the silent song in which they live. Now, walking home through pantomimes of snow, dusting the windless trees. The night is deep with singing stilled, as if the soul could go under the voice as under waves, or keep afloat above its tide, as if to say, music is free to happen its own way. And that concert really taught me something, because those people were nodding their heads in time to the music, and they were obviously enjoying themselves. And I said, well, how nutty of the rest of us to imagine that we are the only ones who could understand this and enjoy it.
Yeah, I taught a music class to high school kids during the time that I was teaching. And I had a hearing impaired student in my music class.
Did you?
Yes. And I had very much the same experience that you're talking about. And I asked all the students to write papers for the end of the year. And she wrote a paper on Beethoven.
Yeah, marvelous.
It was great.
That really cuts you down to size, doesn't it?
Boy, this is today's theme, is how big or small we are, huh?
Oh, Oh, well, if that's the case, I've got just the poem. I just changed tack here. Here we go.
Excellent.
I got the right poem. Where is it? I'm a little off my, okay. This is called Poem to Read at an Open Mic. And this poem shows just how much is resting on this bigness and smallness. And also, you know, the way you guys felt as Duke Ellington was getting out of that car. So this is what this poem is about. Just how much is at stake in song itself. Poem to read at an open mic. If all prospect of happiness were hanging on the singer's voice, if summer's wide salon assigned the one whose song best pleased the crowd a higher social rank, and gave him less whose song was not as lusty or as loud, we'd emulate the chickadee's two plaintive notes. We'd sing as though our hearts were in our throats. The chickadee has everything to lose. His social world is ordered by degrees, rewarding service rendered to the muse. The alpha bird, the beta bird, the lower letters, each ventures forth in song to best his betters, or barring that, at least to hold his own in daily contest where each voice is heard to greet the sun with its distinctive tone. And chief among the auditors, the singer's mate remarks if he be first or second rate, or if his notes slide farther down the scale, she listens for a phrasing she prefers. The singer of the species is the male. Needing a man whom she can call a chickadee, this chick, we'll call her, leaves the family tree to meet her husband's rival for a tryst, some 30-second fling. She has a ball and flits back to the nest before she's missed. Some few chicks of her own ensue from this alliance. A recent issue of the journal Science reports that DNA analysis has shown that, scandalously, 1 or 2 in every clutch is brought to life like this. You'll ask what prompts this kind of study. Who first suspected nestling harmony might prove affected? Is there a moral here? What can it mean? That laurels must be given everybody, lest love of song should make us libertine? But glory cast so far would dim. No two alike, and every one impatient for the mic. No poet wants to miss his chance to shine. A word before you go out on a limb. Your poems had better be as good as mine.
I love it. That's the spirit.
Oh, the claws come out at the end, don't they?
That's so much better than just improve on the blank page. Or what they say about composers is that you have to improve on silence. It's like, no, you got to be better than me. Thank you. I like that. Okay. Well, this too is a true story. The circumstances are quite specific. This comes from, again, from the time that I was teaching, and I was asked to teach a music appreciation class to 7th graders. I didn't want to do it, but I was made to promise I would do it at least once. And this is what happened the once that I did it. It's called Black and Tan Fantasy, which is the name of one of the famous early Duke Ellington songs. And the epigraph explains a bit about it. Trumpeter Bubber Miley's plunger mute style helped to give Duke Ellington's band in the 20s its distinctive jungle band sound. Black and Tan Fantasy was a signature example. As soon as Bubber's growling filled the room, the 7th grade boys started twitching in their seats. "That sounds like it's for strippers," one piped up impishly. I tried to save the moment. "Well, it's true that Ellington wrote this music for dancers, but they didn't." He'd already jumped up from his chair and started miming to the music, knees and elbows swaying. I regarded him with a mild eye, often seen in one perusing a familiar menu, but made no remark. New at my teaching job, hired for high school, but begged to try one period of middle schoolers by this private school's headmaster, I'd agreed reluctantly to take a music class for just one day. One would be all it took. Within what seemed like seconds, an audition for a hoochie coochie chorus line was in full swing, with every boy a writhing star. I stood and watched them, clearly unimpressed. They kicked it up a notch, and in a minute, 15 shirts were on the floor. My face was bland. The music guttural strode on. The pants came next. And when I didn't turn a hair, the rest, until the room was filled like any locker room with naked boys. I looked at them. The music stopped. I paused and said, "What are you going to do now?" They looked around, collected up their clothes, put them back on, and sat down in their seats, their heads, if not hung down, a little lower. The thing is, never give them what they want.
You got that right.
I lived dangerously as a young teacher. I mean, at any time, the head of the school could have walked by the glass part of the door showing prospective students and their parents what a class at the school looked like.
This is the place. This is the place.
Oh my.
This is
True
the place
story,
I'm
though.
looking for.
Well, all right.
Yeah.
Okay, this is good. This is going to sound very, 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 very tame after this.
Rhina, it's going to be like the time when I had to get up. It was at at Newburyport High School auditorium, and they had the stand-up poets, you know.
Mhm.
And one of them had come down off the stage and balanced on the back of one of those chairs and shouted his poem out across the auditorium. And then it was my turn to read.
And what did you take off first?
Oh, God.
All right, a little decorum around here, for heaven's sake. I'm going to be old lady teacher now. This is called cello because we have not yet spoken about the instrument.
That's
Cello.
true.
And I think this was inspired by the animal sound of the instrument. I had never realized before listening to this particular cello how like a roar it is when it goes down far enough. The cello has a kind of that is unforgettable. It was a wonderful concert, but I thought animals during the whole time. It is 4 skeins of gut. Tight on 4 pegs he turns to true the pitch. He secured below over a crested comb, clasped by his legs, wood tortured to a torso. Now the bow, horsehair, taut on a rod with which he plays, and each returns each thing to praise and grieve the gift it gave in dumb compliance. Days it still loves the tree to bud and leave, green in remembrance, and the phantom horse to pace its field again, And with a sound halfway from roar to cry, the ox, dark force, to rise both sweet and harsh from underground, all shedding at his touch their one despair, a kind of unseen blood staining the air.
Wow. Boy, that's a capper of an image. Wow.
It was really magical. I was hearing music, watching people, listening very politely, and all I could think of was animals.
It's very, I think that's the prehistoric slant, you know, that music starts way, way back before there were instruments.
And also the fact that so many of the things that we love most, including the arts, begin with death. Something has to die to give us what we love.
Yeah. Wow. Well, you certainly came up with the antidote for the laughter.
Oh, well, okay. Now, Rhina brought us to the instrument itself. I'm going to take us one step back still. I'm going to bring us to the instrument maker. So this poem is called The Guitar Maker. And it's, Rhina and I do a lot of work with John Tavano. Who's a splendid guitarist. And I mean, I call it work. It's not work, it's serious play, and it's wonderful play. And this poem was written for John Tavano's father-in-law, he was very close to his father-in-law, because he was a guitar maker, and they had that love of the instrument in common. And when this man died, John brought me to his works. He brought me down to the cellar where Herbert Clancy made his guitars, and he just asked me to write about him. And so this is what I wrote: The Guitar Maker, and it's for Herbert Clancy. Like the signature in Maplewood of sun-splashed rain, this man's bright pattern must remain beside the workbench where he stood, smoothing the grain. Deprived of work, he would not rest for fidgeting. He lived to build a living thing that, by impassioned hands caressed, might learn to sing. This shop is where his spirit is. 12 months a year, the world arranged to meet him here, arriving in trust packages from far and near. Rosewood came from India, mahogany from the Caribbean Sea, and from Western Africa came ebony. Tonewoods from earth's four corners sent, he stacked here, stored beneath an image of our Lord, who made of him the instrument of their accord.
Mm.
I love that poem.
Yeah, thank you. I know some of those people, and they're in short supply, but they're extraordinary people. And yet you've really, I think it's great when you actually write poems about humanity, you know, about people, about individuals, that does them justice. So that poem really does. Wow.
Well,
I like it.
In his cellar, he looks like he's at the bottom of the world, you know.
Yes.
The truth is, the world comes to visit him every day.
Yes.
Very quiet man. I remember him.
Oh, you knew him.
Bad jokes too.
Wow. Well, this is good. The variety here is very much what I had hoped for. So since we touched on the instruments, and since I haven't read one about anything except jazz styles. This is classically based. You know, this year is the 250th anniversary of Beethoven's birth, and of course, there's only a few weeks left in the year. So I thought I would get in under the wire this poem that has to do with an eyewitness account of the premiere of Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, which was first performed years and years after Beethoven's deafness had become virtually complete. Despite that, he conducted the premiere performance. So he had to watch the musicians and feel for the vibrations because he couldn't actually hear what they were doing. And a very interesting thing happened. This poem is called What Beethoven Heard. When long deaf Beethoven rehearsed the Ninth, the put-upon sopranos carped about the tessitura of their part and asked for ease of punishment. He cut them dead and sputtered his refusal. Their revenge was taken at the premiere, where they smiled, no doubt sweetly, down at the little man who crouched before them, manic, safe inside the sealed room of his dream, and formed the words and sang, their eyebrows arched in triumph, not a note. The only one who couldn't hear their silence, he went on conducting with, we're told, a face transfigured in its joy.
Oh. Oh, it's sad and yet not. It's a kind of triumph.
Yeah, well, Beethoven was famous for telling people to shut up and play what he wrote, even if it was difficult. And so you can do that. He did that with the guy that premiered the violin concerto, who asked that the part be rewritten to simplify it a little bit. He said, do you suppose I think of your wretched fiddle when the spirit speaks to me?
Wretched fiddle. Oh.
Yes. So I'm here to tell you that you can say that to a violinist, but you can't say it to the sopranos.
No.
They will have their day.
They deserve it.
Well, you can't replace sopranos.
I have something about sopranos and other singers here. I was at a wonderful choral singing, and when we left, I heard people who were walking beside me or behind me saying they sounded like angels. And I thought to myself, no, they didn't. You wouldn't know anyway because you never heard an angel.
Right.
You're mean.
So it's called Salve Regina, which is the piece that they ended with. If there were angels, they would sound this way, climbing by half-tones, smoke of sacrifice soaring by imperceptible degrees, like day lifting itself clear into paradise. Angels would rise from such a nearly still pool of unlabored music through blue air, not even wings to beat or weight of will anchoring them to death or death to bear. But these are men and women singing, feet blood heavy on this unforgiving ground, untouched by angels. If any song is sweet, they sweeten it, inventing the unfound serenity of heaven to rejoice, shaming God to compassion with one voice. You got an old atheist here.
I know. I was going to say, oh, if only it were so. Yeah, that's. Did you ever read the passage by Mark Twain about where he complains about people's view of heaven?
No.
He says all of these people that hated singing in church their whole lives somehow suppose that once they're dead, they will join the heavenly hosts. and be thrilled to sing. And then he has them singing, rah, 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 sis, boom, bah. So,
Got it.
All right,
yes.
I'm going to give you the antidote to Rhina's evil. Rhina's evil. So
Well, you know I'm evil.
That's how you get so much done. Now, this one is in keeping with we've somehow come into a bit of a classical section of this reading. We didn't think that was going to happen, but here we are, and I'm going to stay with that. So this poem is called Sunday. In August, oaks are orchestras in concert on the public greens. The maestro bows to light applause. The crickets tap their tambourines. An easy, bright formality is visited upon the day. Maidenly spirits serve us tea and after clear the cups away. To get us closer to the sky, we rest our dreams upon the grass. The laundered clouds are piled so high the branches will not let them pass. A hawk's wide plowshare tilts and tills his cultivated fields of air. The angels at their windowsills remark the weather passing fair. Something's discovered in a day whose means are matched to gentle ends. From a point of stillness, far away, a parable of light descends.
Boy, I love metaphors.
There's nothing like it.
Terrific use of metaphors. Wow.
He's not bad, this guy, you know. This Nicol, he's all right.
I thought this, I knew this would be fun, but invariably you guys are coming up with poems of yours that even though I have your books, I didn't know. So this is great. I mean, the whole dimension of surprise is just delicious. Thank you.
Well, thank you for coming up with this idea.
It seemed like such a natural idea. I mean, later on we'll use other themes, but it's giving a slice through a poet's work that it's a little different cross section than you might otherwise hear in a regular reading. So
well, it's true. It really does make you go looking for something, and they are not necessarily the ones that you're apt to bring out at a poetry reading.
Right. Yeah, it limits you, and you have to work within the limitation, and that always brings out the best in us.
Yeah.
That like doing that.
Brings out what we avoid for some reason, and I really don't know why.
Yeah.
I don't know why we forget about some of our poems.
Well, you can't read all of them. Well, okay, we've had our classical sojourn. Now I'm going to turn things back to simultaneously the poem about a personality and also a poem about music, because this is one of the great and indelible personalities. Now, my favorite, and I make no secret of this, trumpet player of all time is Louis Armstrong. But my next favorite is Roy Eldridge, and Roy Eldridge was widely celebrated ever since the beginning of his career in the very, very late 20s into the 30s. And he was still playing in the late 70s when I met him and was introduced to him. And this is the substance of our interaction. Certainly one of the favorite days that I've been privileged to live. This is called I Play Roy Eldridge's Trumpet. This took place at a club called Sandy's in Beverly, Massachusetts in 1978. So let me get both parts of this in view. pitted through its silver plate and worn down to the brass. The mouthpiece had held up for him through the fierce hail of sessions since the 30s, as the horns had fallen from his furious assault of breath. Pugnacious, always ready for a challenge, Roy had met the boppers on their native ground and slung his winding phrases serpent-like in hiss and swing over their fractured rhythms. Unquenchable, his fiery spirit torched on in the 70s, the acid rasp still smoking in his tone. At decade's end, approaching 60, in this club tonight, he'd hurtled through his first set, heat undimmed. When on the break, I had been introduced as a fellow trumpet player, and he'd seen I had no horn with me and needn't be regarded as a rival spoiling for a fight. He'd sat down, genial and easy for some shop talk. "So tell me," he began in his high, quick and ginger voice, "who do you listen to? I mean, which trumpet players?" "I'm a swing guy, Roy," I said. "I go from pops to you." He peered up at me through two roundish, thickened lenses. "Yeah," he said and grinned. "Me too." Pleased then with how he'd put the truth into a joke, he saw me steal a look down at the trumpet cradled on his knees, protected by his hand. How much about him I could learn from its details, especially that mouthpiece, which I'd seen on album cover photographs for years. The cup configuration from its depth and shape, the bore and back bore, width and rim, unyielding metal, yet caressed in daily contact with the lips and breath. A player's intimacy, personal and secret, so close by. Roy's eyebrows rose a notch as he said, "Say, I got to use a can. Mind holding on to this a while?" And handed me his horn and nonchalant got up and walked away. I felt its heft for all of 15 seconds then before I took it up and placed my fingertips against the valve caps, checked the dimpled cup, and curious, grateful, brought it to my lips.
Ooh.
How cool was he to do that?
He knew what you were going to do, of course.
Of course he knew what I was going to, of course he knew what I was going to do. It's similar to Ellington. It's like he read my mind.
Yeah. Well, he saw you looking at his hands holding the...
Yeah, he knew perfectly well.
That poem was very well set up. You set us up for that.
Well, thank you. I was astonished that he offered, and I would tell you that it would be a whole other poem for me to explain what I learned when I played it. I learned so many things about him and his technique and how he played, and it's not like, say, driving somebody else's car, but it's more, it's more personal than that. But I really learned a lot of technical things.
But when are you going to write that one? You're going to write that one. Well,
I have written that one about the time that I played Louis Armstrong's trumpet. So I'm saving that for another day.
Oh, that's lovely.
Yeah, I've been a fortunate guy, I have to say. So, okay, onward.
Well, I'm afraid I'm taking you back to the classics.
That's perfectly fine. Roy Eldridge and Louis Armstrong are classics to me, so.
Of course they are. This is another true story, but I'm in the passenger seat here, and my Alfred is driving, and I'm looking out the window, and on the radio is Rachmaninoff. Rachmaninoff on the Mass Pike. It calls the heart, this music, to a place more intimate than home, than self, that face aging in the hall mirror. This is not music to age by. No sprightly gavotte or orderly pavan counting each beat, confining motion to the pointed feet and sagely nodding head. Not Chopin, wise enough to keep some distance in his eyes between perceiver and the thing perceived. No, this is song that means to be believed, that quite believes itself. Each rising wave of passionate crescendo, wild and brave. The silly girl who lived inside my skin once loved this music. Its melodic din was like the voice she dreamed in, sad and tense. She didn't know a thing. She had no sense. She scorned and needed calendar and clock, the rules, the steps, the lines, Sebastian Bach. She wanted life to break her like a tide, but not too painfully. On either side, the turnpike trundles by, nurseries, farms, small towns with schools and markets in their arms, small industry, green spaces now and then. All the heart wants is to be called again.
Boy.
So lovely. I forgot when I try to think of your the poem that I love best of yours, I've been leaving that one out. That's a wonderful poem.
Thank
Well,
you.
it's great that you read it today then, because I actually just read it not a week ago. So it's wonderful to hear you read it.
Well, it's one of those pieces of music that makes you, and I don't remember which of the symphonies it was, but it takes you back to another part of your life,
Mm-hmm.
when you used to think like that.
Yeah.
Of course, when you read it now, it takes you back to two other parts of your life. Riding in that car.
Yes.
And thinking, and while riding in that car, thinking back to another part of your life.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's why I wanted to start with music, because it's such a theme. That's why we all write about it.
Yeah. You can't lose.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you.
This poem's going to take me back to another part of my life, but you know, Rhina took us back to the classics, and I'm going to take you to the utterly unschooled in music. This one is called Black Spinet. It's a poem about the piano coming into my childhood home. I'm preschooler when this is happening. And it's one of those black stand-up pianos. And no one in the house knows how to play it, of course. But it's coming in. And this is a syllabic poem. So it's got 7 syllables in it. You might not hear that. 7 syllables in each line. You might not hear that, but here goes. Black Spinet. On a red and orange day, with many people in it, the new piano arrived. A bird flew in the open door, and a fat man's butt showed above his belt as he leaned to try to lift it himself, before a gang of my uncles tied some old jokes together with brown twine and brown whiskey, and somehow hoisted the thing onto their wiry shoulders like a teetering coffin, and came in through the hallway with a crazed grackle, fluttered till, crashing the wallpaper, it fell, stunned, and got stepped on. My aunts called mother silly for wanting a piano, or for some other reason that got lost halfway upstairs, where I watched through the railing. Wind and leaves skittered outside. The fat man got his money, knocking knickknacks to the floor, drove his truck to Canada, and they sent another man in bow tie and suspenders, a winker the ladies liked. This one tuned the piano, abracadabra like that, with a flourish of nimble fingers even the uncles admired while poking fun, and stayed through supper without eating any meat pie or ever swallowing the green drink balanced on 2 black keys his light hands hopped on their way up and down the run of scales, like two sparrows quarreling back and forth on a long limb. The aunts heard their requests through explosions of gaiety, rocking the couches, singing with impossible voices. Their funny lipstick faded, while curtained night air whispered softest hints of red, and the darkness grew warmer. An elderly gentleman, without a cane or body, gracefully led my mother by the hand through the night to a spot near mine on the porch. On the swinging couch, so old it had grown invisible, another music played there.
That's so cinematic. I can see it as and hear it as a movie in my head.
That's right. And that ending is unexpected.
Yeah, it's a beautiful, well, quiet endings after uproar.
Well, what's happening in that ending is it's taking you out of that time to a time not that long thereafter, where, you know, that man, that elderly gentleman without a body or a cane, he's not to be trusted.
Wow. Oh boy.
Yeah.
Well, I've given myself the last word here, so I thought I would read a poem that would take somebody who is an improviser and a poet to write, to know to write. And what it attempts to do is to explain what's going on in my head when I'm playing. It's called Playing the Solo. To start, you have to choose a note to play. The first question is not which one, but when. The chord you play it over helps you choose. And then how long to hold it and what shape to give it, straight or bent or with vibrato. Where do you go next? Jump up or down, and by how much? Or play the first again and right away, or do you leave a space? The chord you play it over helps you choose, but time is moving and the chord may change. And so you have to listen to the band, and in the meantime, listen to yourself. This exercise of putting notes together may make you think of others that you've heard. So you may go that way a while and play something familiar you can execute. Or you may let it pass and pick a note that sends you in a different direction and play things that you never have before. At the same time this is happening, you're not thinking at all exactly, only playing and reacting, listening inside your head and outside all at once, your mind a blank, and feeling your way through, and feeling the emotion of the moment and singing it or dancing it, your sound and steps made out of notes and silence. But first, you find your way to feel the time, because after you know the chords and scales, you understand the possibilities and what at any moment is implied. Strive to be always open to the moment. Most players play around with chords and scales and fill the air with notes and sound the same. Only a few can play around with time, and everyone who does is different.
Oh, lovely. Oh, lovely. Now that's a real musician's story.
I'd like to say that all of that actually goes on in my head, but it's hard to describe the process in words. But that's an attempt at it, at least. What everybody says is that you try the best you can to get to the point where your mind is a blank and you're just hearing and playing. you're not actually thinking. And that's my goal. That's where, after 40 or 50 or 60 years, that's where I'm trying to get to. In the meantime, I'm still thinking some, and so that's how I had something to say in the poem.
But that's very interesting that the musician wants to stop thinking and let the music play itself.
Yes. Well, you want to get to the unconscious levels of your feelings and thoughts, rather than to
intellect.
Yeah, try to use the intellect. You want to get to, you want to get down to down below the line.
See, we can't stop thinking. We have to keep thinking because language comes from thought. But you're right. It has to be a different kind of thought. It has to be the kind of thought that doesn't depend on intellect. It depends on something deeper, something else, something more raw.
You know what, Rhina? What Al's poem just did is brought us full circle back to your poem, Prosody. The things that you say in that poem.
Could I close with one that would really be a complete close?
I don't see why not.
Because this is going back to the poet again.
Please do.
It's called Marginal. And it's the poet as a poor guy running around on street corners. Like the poor everywhere, the poem lives, if it lives, by wit and pluck. It looks over the trash put out by the five senses, those rich neighbors, and uses what it can, like wool from an old sweater. It warms itself by dancing, amuses the crowds waiting in line for movie tickets. It walks against the wind, thinking of summer, teaching itself to sing. I wasn't going to do that one, but you made it sort of come to my mind because
I'm happy that you had the last word.
It's the use of the unconscious again, and it's the joining of music and language again.
Yeah, no, I'm so glad that went last, because we really have sort of described an arc.
Yes, yes, we have.
And come back. So I couldn't wish for anything more structured as a result of
being random.
Yeah, right.
Oh, this was fun.
Yes, thank you. I'm so glad that you two are the first in a series. I will be so happy if at any other time in the future I can come up to I can get a show together that comes up to this. I mean, I couldn't choose any better than to have you two. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Wow, this is great. So, and as I have said, I think in my emails, I'm going to do several on the musical theme, and then I'm going to go on to another theme.
Mm-hmm.
And so there isn't any reason not to invite people back when the theme changes.
Yeah, but it's such a good idea to have really the whole world open in front of you, because you can choose anything you want. You can choose animals, you can choose flight, you can choose time.
Yes, what it's causing me to do, because I have to be able to provide enough poems on the theme myself, it's making me think about what I choose to write about.
Mm.
I went through the 300 poems in my 3 books. I've got a book coming out right after the turn of the year that's another 100. So that's 300 of them. There were 40 poems on music. Mm. When you, Alf, when you said you had 17 to choose from, and I said, gee, I don't think I have that many. I didn't think I had that many.
Right, yeah.
Because whoever thinks about that, except if there's a specific occasion to do so.
Right.
So it was very revealing. And so now it's like it's making me look across. I mean, I have so many that deal with childhood. I have so many that deal with family, with parents.
Oh, with cooking, you have all those food poems.
I have cooking ones.
Oh,
yes.
Do you have food poems? They're wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a healthy exercise for me. And then, as I say, this is a good example of how it can be fun for, for everybody that's taking part. And I think it will be fun for people to look and listen to as well.
Yeah, you know it's going to be something that distinguishes this from others is that you're always going to be part of it. And so the listener who joins in with any kind of regularity is going to have someone that he or she knows there. Oh, I'm going with Al to meet these other poets.
Right. Yeah.
So it's gonna. That's something that's gonna be something to do.
Thing. Yeah.
Yeah. There's the idea of having an anchor. I think does have some value, but also I think that I'm really trying to appeal to people on the basis of the attractiveness of the theme itself. So, so often we read for our peers, we read for other poets. And so I was consciously trying to come up with a form that might be able to appeal to people who might not know any of us, but just think it might be interesting to hear poems on a particular subject. I gave a reading once at an Irish pub on Mother's Day, and I read poems about my mother. And the people in that pub, aside from the fact that they'd been, they were well lubricated, more so than the usual crowd that we speak to, although maybe I'm wrong there. But they were not, it wasn't a poetry reading audience, it was people. Mm-hmm. But they all had mothers. And so they responded so well to the poems because they were on a subject that was close to their heart. There was something that they had strong feelings about the theme, about the topic. And that's what I want to try to capitalize on, because I would like nothing better than to eventually get outside of the circle that we all enjoy among ourselves, out to people who, aren't going to say, oh, gee, that's a villanelle or whatever.
Okay.
This is Bob Dylan had this with his radio theme hour.
Yes.
And of course, and one of his very early themes was mother.
Yes.
Another one that he had was drinking. So you can just keep that in your mind too.
I don't.
What your friend Alfred? What is his name? Oh, Sid Lee.
Yeah.
Who writes about drinking and bars and marvelous poems. Marvelous.
Yeah, see, that's my problem is I don't have any poems about. Well, I have one. I'll have to look. Maybe I have 5. I'll have to look. Talk about a rich subject.
Sometimes it ends up a poor subject.
Yes.
Yeah.
Depends on how the mind holds on to the language.
It's true.
But he knows what to do with a poem about drink. He really does.
God. Yeah.
Wow. Well,
thank you very much.
We'll tie this up. We'll probably edit at some point a few minutes ago when we, turned off our little pilot lights. But this is terrific, and no reason why we can't do it again sometime. So.
Well, thanks for making us the trail breakers.
Well, you gotta hit them with your best shot to start out, don't you?
You said trailblazers, Rhina. It's guinea pigs.
I forgot.
I was not troubled by a lack of confidence that this would work.
Thank you for that.
Your poems are better be as good as mine.
Or better.
Well, I had to. You terrified me. I mean, scared?
Wow.
All right.
Well, this is great. Well, thank you very, very much. I'm going to end the meeting, but I didn't see either of you with the poem for tomorrow's workshop. So if you're not there, have a great Christmas season coming up. It's going to be on us in about a minute and a half.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to be there tomorrow. I don't have anything to read, but I want to listen.
Okay, great. That's
can't.
good.
I don't want to bore you with the details, but oh my Lord.
Well, sorry to hear that. But that means I'm glad you're available today because, you know, you're in, the demand is great. The supply of Alfred Nicol's is short.
Yeah, the elves.
We need to.
This time of year, there's a big demand on elves.
Oh, is that what it is?
Bye-bye, you guys.
So long. Thanks again.
By no means behave yourselves.
No, we won't.
I'll try hard.